Japan and Australia have signed a landmark defense agreement in what is seen as a bulwark against China's rising economic and military might.
Australia just made a move that could change the Indo-Pacific forever. A single defense pact just put China on high alert, and it could reshape global power. Australia has just solidified a historic defense agreement with Japan, an unprecedented step that marks a dramatic escalation in regional defense strategy. This isn't just another diplomatic handshake. This pact is a direct response to China's growing military presence, and it's already sending shockwaves across Asia. It's a bold move, but it's also a risky one. Australia is aligning itself closer than ever to its Quad allies, tightening the strategic noose around China's sphere of influence. But with chances of China reacting furiously, some are questioning whether this alliance will spark a dangerous escalation. Will this new alliance backfire and provoke China into an aggressive response? Can Australia handle the economic fallout if Beijing retaliates? And is the Quad really prepared for the consequences of this bold new pact? We're about to break down how this pact came to be, why it's so crucial, and what it means for the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. To understand why Australia's new defense pact is such a game changer, we first need to look at the strategic powerhouse behind it, the Quad. The Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, better known as the Quad, is more than just a diplomatic arrangement. It's a calculated effort to maintain stability and security in one of the world's most contested regions, the Indo-Pacific. At its core, the Quad is an alliance of four major democracies: Australia, the United States, Japan, and India. It was initially formed as an informal dialogue back in 2007, largely driven by a shared interest in keeping the Indo-Pacific free from coercion and maintaining open sea lanes for global trade. The idea was simple: four regional powers working together to counterbalance any one nation gaining too much influence. But there's no denying that the Quad has evolved into something far more significant, especially as China's ambitions have grown bolder and more unyielding. In the early days, the Quad didn't have the military edge it possesses now. It was primarily seen as a diplomatic forum, a way for these nations to keep tabs on regional security without openly provoking China. That changed drastically when Beijing began flexing its muscles in the South China Sea, constructing artificial islands and ramping up its naval presence. The tipping point came in 2021, when Chinese military aircraft repeatedly breached Taiwan's air defense zone, and the world watched anxiously as tensions escalated. Suddenly, the Quad's purpose became clear. It wasn't just about dialogue anymore. It was about deterrence. Since then, the Quad has grown teeth. It now conducts regular joint military exercises, such as the Malabar naval drills, where all four nations practice coordinated maneuvers and combat scenarios. These exercises are designed to enhance interoperability and ensure that, if conflict ever breaks out, the Quad can operate as a unified force. This isn't just about muscle flexing. It's a message to China that any aggressive move in the Indo-Pacific will be met with a coordinated and formidable response. But the Quad's strategy goes beyond military drills. There's a growing emphasis on intelligence sharing, cybersecurity cooperation, and building stronger economic ties. By fostering a united front, the Quad aims to present itself not as a military bloc, but as a stabilizing force committed to maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. This phrase has become somewhat of a mantra for the alliance, a direct challenge to Beijing's increasingly assertive policies, particularly in disputed waters. Now, within the Quad, each member plays a unique role. The United States brings unmatched military power and a global network of alliances. India offers strategic depth, given its proximity to China and its control over crucial sea routes in the Indian Ocean. Japan, situated near the contentious East China Sea, contributes advanced technological and maritime capabilities. And then there's Australia, the linchpin in the South Pacific. Australia's position is absolutely critical. As the only member of the Quad located directly in the South Pacific, it acts as a geographical counterweight to China's influence in the region. Its defense infrastructure, including air bases, naval ports, and intelligence-sharing facilities, serves as a crucial forward operating position for the Quad's strategic objectives. Moreover, Australia's long-standing defense ties with the United States make it a natural conduit for American military assets moving through the Pacific. The Quad's strategic importance can't be overstated. China knows this too, and that's precisely why it's so infuriated by Australia's latest move. Strengthening defense ties with Japan is just the latest step in Australia's broader strategy to reinforce the Quad's military readiness and ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains an open and secure corridor, not a battleground for Chinese dominance. But while the Quad's mission is clear, the path forward is anything but straightforward. There's no denying that Beijing sees this alliance as a direct threat, an encirclement designed to curtail its rise. That perception is already stirring tensions, and as the Quad nations tighten their cooperation, the question remains, how far is China willing to go to push back? With Australia now doubling down on its commitment to the Quad, it's clear that Canberra isn't backing down from the challenge. But what about the other side of this equation? How is China reacting to this newfound solidarity among the Quad members? And could this defense pact actually provoke a conflict rather than prevent one? Let's break down how the Japan-Australia Defense Pact of 2023 ties into this escalating tension and why it could be the most consequential move yet. The Japan-Australia Reciprocal Access Agreement, RAA, is more than just another defense pact. It's a bold strategic maneuver that marks a new era of military cooperation between two key players in the Indo-Pacific, Australia and Japan. This agreement is historic, not just because of its content, but because of what it represents. A clear, unified stance against rising Chinese influence in the region.
Sealed with a smile, Australia and Japan have inked a landmark new defence pact.
Prime Minister, this is a pivotal moment for Australia and Japan.
The Reciprocal Access Agreement is the first deal of its kind Japan has entered into with another country.
This agreement,
signed virtually by Australian Justice Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, the pact was hailed as a pivotal moment for both nations. Morrison didn't mince words when he called it a cornerstone for maintaining security and stability in the Indo-Pacific, particularly as China continues to expand its military and economic reach. Kishida echoed that sentiment, describing the agreement as a landmark instrument that would take their security cooperation to unprecedented levels. The RAA isn't just symbolic, it's practical, comprehensive, and, most importantly, strategic. It creates a legal framework that allows for streamlined and more complex military cooperation between the Australian Defence Force, ADF, and the Japan Self-Defense Force, JSDF. This isn't just about vague promises of collaboration. It's about boots on the ground, planes in the air, and ships in contested waters. One of the most notable aspects of the RAA is its provision for joint military exercises and training between the two nations. We're talking about Japanese F-35s deploying to Australia for the first time, and Australian F-35s heading to Japan in reciprocal drills. For the first time, Australia will participate as a full member in Exercise Yamasakura, a major annual training event that sharpens combat readiness and interoperability between forces. These exercises aren't just for show, they're real, tactical operations designed to improve readiness and demonstrate a united front against any potential adversary. Beyond training, the agreement also facilitates faster deployment of personnel and easier transportation of weapons and supplies. This means that if a regional conflict were to erupt, Australia and Japan could respond more swiftly and efficiently than ever before. The logistical hurdles that typically bog down military cooperation have been minimized, allowing for rapid joint responses to crises. But why was this pact necessary in the first place? To understand that, we need to examine Japan's unique position. Despite having one of the world's most technologically advanced militaries, Japan is still shackled by its pacifist constitution, Article 9, which prohibits it from maintaining a standing army or using force to settle international disputes. While Japan has reinterpreted this clause over the years to allow for collective self-defense, it still faces significant limitations when projecting military power abroad. Partnering with Australia, however, circumvents some of those restrictions. By collaborating closely with Canberra, Japan bolsters its regional presence without directly violating its constitutional constraints. This partnership allows Japan to assert itself as a security leader in the Indo-Pacific, while sidestepping the domestic and international criticism that would inevitably follow unilateral military actions. For Australia, the logic is equally compelling. Situated in the South Pacific, it's on the front line of any potential conflict involving China's expanding maritime reach. Strengthening ties with Japan, especially given Tokyo's proximity to key flashpoints like the East and South China Seas, means bolstering its own defense posture while reassuring its allies that it's committed to maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. Of course, China's reaction was swift. Beijing condemned the RAA as a provocative move that threatens regional peace and stability. Chinese state media accused Australia and Japan of stoking tensions and warned that such alliances could lead to an arms race in the region. In Beijing's view, the RAA is nothing more than an American-backed plot to contain China's rise, a perception that's already feeding into its aggressive military posturing. We can all agree that the agreement is a pragmatic step towards collective security, especially given China's increasingly assertive actions near Taiwan and within the South China Sea. To them, strengthening Australia-Japan cooperation is crucial for maintaining a balance of power and preventing any one nation from dominating the Indo-Pacific. Others, however, see it as a dangerous escalation that could inadvertently provoke China into more aggressive military maneuvers. They warn that by tightening military cooperation without offering diplomatic off-ramps, the Quad, and particularly Australia and Japan, could end up entrenching hostilities rather than fostering stability. Still, for both Canberra and Tokyo, the choice seemed clear. The security environment is becoming more unpredictable, and the stakes are too high to sit back and hope for the best. By locking in this new defense pact, they've sent a powerful message, not just to Beijing, but to the entire international community. They're prepared to stand firm against coercion, protect their shared interests, and ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains open and secure. The RAA isn't just a piece of paper. It's a statement of intent, a declaration that Australia and Japan won't be bullied or cornered. Whether it deters China or provokes it remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, the Indo-Pacific just became a lot more unpredictable. But with China's growing determination to push its strategic boundaries, will this pact be enough to maintain regional stability? Or will it set off a chain reaction that draws more nations into an escalating power struggle? The implications of the Australia-Japan Reciprocal Access Agreement reach far beyond just the two signatory nations. This pact is a critical piece of the larger strategic puzzle that the Quad is trying to put together, a puzzle that's aimed squarely at countering China's ambitions in the Indo-Pacific. To understand why the RAA is such a game-changer, it's essential to look at the timing and context. In the years leading up to the agreement, China had dramatically increased its military presence in disputed areas, particularly in the South China Sea and around Taiwan. It was building artificial islands, deploying anti-ship and surface-to-air missiles, and conducting aggressive naval maneuvers. In response, the Quad members found themselves at a crossroads: either bolster their collective security or risk being outpaced and outmaneuvered by Beijing's rapid military modernization. Australia, feeling increasingly vulnerable due to its geographic position and heavy economic reliance on China, knew it couldn't afford to stand alone. Meanwhile, Japan faced growing threats from both China and North Korea, making regional partnerships more critical than ever. The RAA offered both countries a way to fortify their defense postures without appearing overly provocative on their own. By working together, they could amplify their strategic footprint without directly antagonizing China as individual actors. And while Beijing's reaction was predictably harsh, accusing Canberra and Tokyo of attempting to encircle China, the reality is that both nations are playing a delicate balancing act. They are strengthening deterrence while carefully avoiding open confrontation. The RAA essentially allows Japan to extend its influence without breaching constitutional limits and lets Australia signal its willingness to stand firm without appearing overly aggressive. But there's more to the story than just military cooperation. This pact is also about intelligence sharing and logistical support, allowing both countries to respond to potential crises far more efficiently. Whether it's humanitarian assistance or rapid troop deployment, the agreement streamlines processes that would otherwise take weeks of bureaucratic navigation. This ability to act quickly and decisively in the event of a conflict, or even a natural disaster, cements their role as reliable security partners within the Quad framework. Critically, this move also signals to other regional players, like India and Southeast Asian nations, that the Quad is serious about maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. It reassures smaller states that they're not being left alone to deal with China's intimidation tactics. Instead, it shows that Australia and Japan are willing to take concrete steps to ensure that regional stability isn't just an abstract concept, but a tangible reality. However, this also raises an uncomfortable question. Does deepening military cooperation make conflict more likely? Some experts argue that China's leadership could interpret these moves as a sign that the Quad is becoming less of a diplomatic initiative and more of a military bloc. If Beijing genuinely believes it's being encircled, it could respond with heightened aggression, perhaps through increased military exercises near Taiwan or escalated naval patrols in contested waters. And while Australia and Japan are clearly preparing for that possibility, it's important to note that neither country wants outright war. They're seeking deterrence rather than provocation, trying to build a posture strong enough to dissuade China from attempting any unilateral moves. The RAA, then, is both a shield and a statement, a way to say, we're prepared, without actively inciting conflict. Yet the ramifications don't stop there. The Pact also has diplomatic consequences, forcing other nations to reassess their own security policies. South Korea, for instance, may feel pressured to align more closely with the Quad to avoid being isolated. Meanwhile, Southeast Asian nations like the Philippines and Vietnam, already wary of China's territorial claims, might find themselves quietly supporting the RAA, even if they don't openly endorse it. The United States, of course, is likely cheering from the sidelines. Washington has long pushed for its allies to take on a greater share of the security burden in the region, and the RAA aligns perfectly with that vision. By enabling Japan and Australia to strengthen their partnership independently, the US gets the strategic benefit without having to make new, direct commitments itself. Meanwhile, Europe is also watching closely. Nations like the UK and France, which have shown increasing interest in the Indo-Pacific, may see the RAA as a template for further strengthening defense ties with regional allies. If more agreements like this start cropping up, it could mark the beginning of a robust, multilateral security architecture aimed explicitly at balancing China's ambitions. But even as the Quad members celebrate the RAA as a victory for regional stability, the risks remain real. If China decides that the Pact is an unacceptable provocation, it might start pushing back harder, whether by targeting Australian exports, ramping up cyber attacks, or pressuring Japan through economic means. A calculated escalation on Beijing's part could force Canberra and Tokyo into making hard choices about how far they're willing to go to defend their new security framework. This precarious balance leaves the region walking a tightrope. On one hand, bolstered alliances like the RAA are essential for maintaining a power equilibrium. On the other hand, they risk hardening battle lines, making peaceful resolution increasingly difficult. One thing's for sure, the RAA isn't just a bilateral agreement. It's a litmus test for the Quad's resolve and a signal to China that its neighbors are no longer content to watch passively from the sidelines. Whether it serves as a genuine deterrent or a catalyst for greater tension remains to be seen.